Thank you guys so much. Can everyone hear me okay? Cool. So my name is Manon Dave. I'm here to really talk about how I think technology has shifted my reality and made some of the things that I wasn't really supposed to be able to do possible. And actually how I think all humanity can start to tap into the thing that is most innately human in us, which is to make stuff, to create. And I can only really tell this, I guess, through my own lens and my own story. So I'll start there. I was born in Harrow in London. So big up the mayor of Harrow out in the building today. Honored to have you here, sir. And as kind of a native Harrow boy, and I say native tongue in cheek, I had really only two opportunities to choose my dream. The creativity that I was allowed to choose my dream was really between becoming a doctor or an engineer. So as somebody who had to make that hard decision, as I'm sure many other folks here may have, as a son of two Indian parents, one from Africa, one from India, so just double whammy, I was obviously choosing the one that made most sense to me, given my severe lack of intelligence and a little bit nervous about touching the human body or giving somebody medication and perhaps falling flat on my face doing it. I decided to choose engineering. So I studied engineering, but well before that, I'd always been a creative kid. I always wanted to make music, play video games, read comic books, was fascinated by anything fantasy, superheroes. And around 15, 16, I started to get into music making. And I started to, use computers to make music because I had two left hands, couldn't really play the guitar. I definitely didn't try and dance earlier during the break because that would have been embarrassing. And I just basically steered clear of trying to expose myself too much in that world, but just somehow understood technology and computers and early doors. I'm talking about, Commodore 64, for those of you who are old enough to remember that. And later on, I got my first IBM computer where I downloaded this dodgy piece of software called FL Studio or Fruity Loops and started making music in my bedroom. Fast forward, I was told by my parents and uncles and aunts and cousins and friends who loved me, of course, and wanted me to pursue all the right things, to delete these stupid dreams. Focus on what you need to do. So I was like, okay, cool. I have to do that. You're right. Went to university. I went to Kingston University. And at Kingston, I made a bunch of beats in my bedroom and occasionally showed up to lectures and was doing okay, studying software engineering, computing, business management, all that kind of good stuff. But I rapidly started to, gather pace on this platform called MySpace, if anybody remembers that. And I would have people listening to my music from all around the world. And eventually I got a gig to produce a record for somebody over in the States, which just felt like I won the lottery. So flew out to America, spent some time there, summer, basically the end of my final year, on the whatever I had left of the student loan. And now I was this weird kid around 2006, walking around with a laptop, had almost no musical skill in terms of playing instruments or singing or anything traditionally recognizable as a musical skill. But I was able to just hear what I wanted to do and literally draw notes into a computer, much like MS Paint, if you have used that. And people were kind of mesmerized and were like, oh, cool, that seems to be a new, interesting way of making music. Long story short, I ended up getting some music on a couple of TV shows out there. And then 2007, 2008, a big writer's strike happened. So it was no work. I had to get back to the UK and get a real job. I spent the next 4 or 5 years being a really crappy software engineer, a very average designer, product designer, really bad QA or quality assurance engineer, and just navigating, bumbling around in the ad tech world, but making do in a few lovely bosses who I think took pity on me and pointed me in the right direction. And I managed to find my role in product development where I could somehow lean into my creativity and somehow find this spark where I could say, okay, cool, there are problems in this space and maybe solving those problems is a creative endeavor. And working with these engineers and designers and so on is in some ways like conducting the orchestra. I told myself these tall tales and these stories, and I actually loved it. And I started to get really good at it, and I pursued that. Then in 2012, there's something called the EU cookie law. If you guys go on any websites now, you accept or reject cookies, or most of you accept them because nobody can be bothered to have the inconvenience of rejecting them. So that happened. The industry was in tatters. And I said, you know what? Enough is enough. I need to find a way to fuse my passions. Moved to Berlin. In Berlin, I created something called Machine, which is a music production device that a lot of musicians started using. Hardware and software. I never had any experience in that before, but I just told the guys who interviewed me that, listen, I've illegally downloaded your software for the last 8 years, and I know exactly what's wrong with it, and I promise I can help you fix it. So went through this process over a couple years and designed this product, and it flew. You know, in the music industry, if you walk into any studio today, there's one of those devices there. I spent the next 4 or 5 years, again, in my job as an engineer, product person, designer, building more music tech products. They ended up in every Apple store in the world through this crazy journey of 4 or 5 years of raising money and doing all the right things that a lot of the folks here, you know, as leaders in whichever industry you're in, but also specifically in technology startups, are doing. So really following the blueprint of working in music, in technology. In the background, though, I was always making music, and I was always just like, you know, scratching the itch and trying to remain creative. And I just found this perfect balance of like realizing that actually technology is in some ways my own instrument, my own paintbrush. And I kind of got to this point in 2018 where we sold that business, and suddenly, you know, having grown up in a 3-bedroom council flat and lived there for 35 years of my life, with my mum and my dad and my sister, who was still at university, we managed to suddenly be in a position to, you know, buy a place. We're still not in London, obviously. Buy a place further out. We moved here to Cambridgeshire, to St Neots, and buy another place for my now wife, who moved in with shortly thereafter. And I started a business, and that business grew to bringing me into contact with people, many of whom are here today, where I'm able to talk about this journey, but then build more products with folks like Idris Elba, who I partnered with to build the Akuna wallet, which is a wallet in Africa for creative folks who are not able to be banked because they don't have identity, to have an identity, have ability to trade, and ultimately get paid for these creative, technology-driven endeavors, you know, YouTubing or creating films independently and pushing those out into the market, where PayPal won't even recognize the country that they're from to be paid into their accounts despite the success of these things. So all of these endeavors ultimately led to this strange concoction of technology, creativity, culture being centrally responsible for the trajectory and arc of not just me, but my family, the people I employ, the folks that use those products to create new works of art and new pieces of technology that other people consume. And what I realized actually is that this kind of never-ending battle that we all have internally when we feel the incessant need to make, to be of influence, to create, but then somehow we fall back into our seats to be answerable and be the ones to follow and the ones to yield, I think it's a time that's about to change. Picasso once said, "Everything you can imagine is real," which sounds like a very romantic, fantastical way of looking at the world, until you start to realize the things that people on the stage here have been saying, people before me, and you start to see that things like AI, shortly before that, things like machine learning, shortly before that, things like algorithmic advertising on YouTube and Instagram, are starting to predict our thoughts, some for negative causes, and we know what's going on in the world today. But what about those who are able to leverage and yield those paintbrushes and those tools to create positive outcomes, to help go from idea to product or idea to manifestation with the lowest latency in history? Maybe Picasso wasn't such a dreamer. Maybe everything you can imagine, it is possible to create reality from. And so I remember a lot of my brothers and sisters and friends and family who, even today, for their own kids, they just want the best. And they're still saying, delete your stupid dreams. But I like to think maybe it's LOSD, live on stupid dreams. Thank you very much.